When racist influencer walks into luxury restaurant, the plan is simple. Mock Big Shaq, stir controversy, and go viral. But what racist influencer doesn't realize? This isn't just another internet stunt. With cameras rolling and the world watching, Big Shaq delivers a lesson so powerful, so undeniable, that racist influencers' entire empire starts to crumble. One brutal truth at a time. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us, where are you watching from? Share in the comments below. The Golden Ivy wasn't just a restaurant, it was a statement. A glass-walled masterpiece in the heart of the city, where the elite dined under golden chandeliers, where the scent of aged wine and truffle butter clung to the air like a whisper of wealth. Tonight, it hummed with low conversation, the clinking of crystal, the measured laughter of people who knew their wallets were as full as their plates. And then, the room shifted. Big Shaq stepped inside. At 7'1", he was impossible to ignore, not that anyone wanted to. His presence wasn't just physical, it was magnetic. Some men walked into a room and took up space. Shaq walked in and filled it, not with arrogance but with something rarer, warmth. He didn't just acknowledge people, he saw them. "Elliot, my man, how's the little one?" he rumbled, shaking hands with the maitre d'. Elliot grinned. "Growing like a weed, thanks to that little scholarship fund you set up." Shaq waved it off like it was nothing. Maybe to him, it was. To others, it was everything. As he moved through the restaurant, he greeted the staff by name. Maria, who always made sure his steak was cooked just right. Devin, the busboy working 2 jobs to put himself through college. He didn't just tip well, he tipped thoughtfully. $100 to the young server with tired eyes. $200 to the bartender, who had once mentioned his mother's hospital bills. Shaq settled into his usual table, a quiet corner with just enough light. The waiter, a nervous new hire named Jamie, fumbled the water pitcher, nearly spilling it all over the table. "My bad, big man," Jamie stammered. Shaq just chuckled, steadying the glass with one massive hand. "No stress, brother. First day?" Jamie nodded. "You'll be all right. Just breathe." Jamie exhaled, relieved. Around Shaq, people exhaled a lot. Then, the air changed. The doors swung open again, and with them came a different kind of presence. Not warmth, but something sharper. Cold, calculated, entitled. Hunter Graves strolled in. A camera crew followed him, subtly recording his every move for the millions that hung on his every word online. He wasn't a traditional celebrity. He was an influencer. A self-made brand built on controversy, arrogance, and an unshakable belief in his own superiority. His videos weren't just about luxury. They were about power. And nothing got him clicks faster than belittling those he deemed beneath him. Shaq noticed him immediately, but didn't react. That was Shaq's way. He had seen 100 men like Hunter before. They came in different packages. Some in suits, some in jerseys, some behind podiums. But they all had the same core, insecurity wrapped in bravado. Hunter's eyes flicked to Shaq, and something in them gleamed. A challenge, maybe, or an opportunity. "Yo, get this," he muttered to his crew, a smirk curling at his lips. The cameras angled slightly, framing Shaq in the background as Hunter slid into his seat, his voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. "Man, these places used to be exclusive." A few of his friends chuckled. Shaq didn't move. He didn't need to. He'd been playing this game long before Hunter ever learned the rules. Elliot, the maitre d', stepped forward, his tone clipped. "Mr. Graves, will you be dining with us this evening, or just filming?" Hunter's smirk widened. "Relax, Elliot. We'll order something. Gotta make sure the food's really 5-star, right?" The crew snickered. Across the room, a young fan, no more than 10, gathered his courage and approached Shaq's table, clutching a napkin like it was made of gold. "Excuse me, sir?" the boy asked, barely above a whisper. Shaq turned, his expression softening instantly. "What's up, little man?" The boy swallowed hard. Could I get your autograph?" Shaq didn't hesitate. He took the napkin, scrawled his name across it, and even added a little note. "Dream big, kid." The boy beamed. His father, watching from a nearby table, nodded in gratitude. And just like that, Hunter saw his angle. "Man," Hunter said loudly. "Y'all act like this guy's a saint. He throws a ball in a hoop and suddenly he's royalty?" His friends laughed. Shaq paused, his expression unreadable. He had been here before. Different faces, same energy. He took a slow sip of water, said nothing. But the room had noticed. Elliot's jaw tightened. The bartender frowned. Jamie, the nervous waiter, exchanged a glance with the busboy. Hunter saw the shift, but he wasn't done. Not yet. He leaned back, smug, as if testing how far he could push before something snapped. What he didn't realize was this: Shaq never snapped, but that didn't mean he wouldn't break a man in other ways. And tonight, Hunter Graves was about to learn the difference. The Golden Ivy had always been a place of refined luxury, where conversations floated lightly over candlelit tables, blending with the soft clinking of wine glasses and the hum of a jazz melody playing in the background. Tonight, however, an unsettling tension curled through the air like an invisible fog, creeping into the spaces between hushed voices and stolen glances. The source of it sat just a few tables away from Big Shaq, Hunter Graves, and his entourage. Shaq, ever the composed presence, continued enjoying his meal, his large hands moving with effortless ease as he cut into a perfectly cooked steak. His focus wasn't on the murmurs slipping through the cracks of conversation, but on the flavors, the moment, the simple pleasure of a good meal in a good place. But the whispers had started, subtle at first, carrying the sharp edge of something venomous. "Man, can you believe this?" Hunter muttered to his crew, his voice low but intentionally loud enough for a few tables to catch. "You'd think this place had standards." A few of his friends chuckled. The cameras, though not directly pointed at Shaq, were capturing every second of this. Hunter was playing a game, a dangerous one, and he knew it. The restaurant staff moved with tense professionalism, their bodies rigid as they pretended not to hear. The guests exchanged quick glances, some uncomfortable, others wary. No one wanted to be the one to step in. Not yet. At Shaq's table, a young boy, maybe 10 or 11, hesitated at the edge of the booth, his small hands clutching a napkin and a pen like they were sacred relics. His father stood a few steps behind, encouraging but cautious, as if he, too, could feel the shift in the air. "Excuse me, sir?" the boy said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Shaq turned, his massive frame moving slowly, deliberately. His face, though serious, melted into something warm when he saw the nervous kid. "What's up, little man?" The boy gulped, his knuckles whitening around the napkin. Could I get your autograph?" Shaq didn't hesitate. He took the napkin, carefully signed his name, and then, after a pause, added a short message. "Dream big, kid. The world's got space for you." The boy's eyes widened. His father smiled, nodding in appreciation before gently leading his son back to their table. But the moment of quiet admiration wasn't one Hunter was willing to let slide. He tapped his fork against his plate, a slow, deliberate sound that made the people at his table smirk. "Man, you see that?" he said, voice rising just enough. "People act like celebrities are gods or something. Like I don't get it. What did he do? Throw a ball through a hoop?" The laughter from his table was more pointed now, cutting through the quiet of the restaurant. A couple at a nearby table shifted uncomfortably. A waiter refilled a glass with slightly shaky hands. Shaq didn't move. He didn't react. But the subtle shift was there. His shoulders, so naturally relaxed, straightened just slightly. The rhythm of his movements slowed. Hunter saw it, and he wanted more. "I mean, I get it," Hunter continued, still in that fake casual tone. "People just love to worship celebrities, even when they don't really belong here." The last sentence sliced through the air like a knife. A silence settled over the nearest tables, thick and suffocating. The staff, who had been expertly avoiding eye contact, now exchanged glances. Elliot, the maitre d', stood stiff behind the podium, his jaw tight. The bartender set down a glass a little too hard. Jamie, the young waiter who had fumbled the water earlier, visibly tensed, his fingers curling into his apron. He had grown up admiring Shaq, not just for what he did on the court, but for the way he gave back, the way he carried himself. To hear someone speak like this, in a place like this, in front of a man like Shaq, made something burn in his chest. Hunter leaned back in his chair, smirking as he scrolled through his phone. His live stream chat was buzzing. Some of his fans ate it up, laughing along. But others weren't as amused. Yo, chill, man. Dude, that's kinda messed up. Shaq's done more for people than you ever have. The tide wasn't turning yet, but there was a shift. Hunter, focused on his own arrogance, didn't see it. But Shaq did. He took his time finishing his bite, chewing with the kind of patience that came from knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. He reached for his glass of water, taking a slow sip, letting the tension stretch just long enough for Hunter to think he had won. And then, with a quiet, steady voice, Shaq finally spoke. "Let me ask you something, young man." His tone was even, but there was weight in it, the kind that made the people at the surrounding tables hold their breath. Hunter, caught off guard by the response, glanced up. "Yeah?" Shaq set his glass down, resting his massive hands on the table. His eyes, deep and steady, locked onto Hunter's. "What exactly don't I belong to?" Hunter opened his mouth, but for the first time, he hesitated. Shaq didn't move, didn't blink. He let the question hang in the air, let it wrap around the room, let every person in that restaurant feel the weight of it. Hunter chuckled, though it sounded forced. "Man, come on. You know what I meant." "No," Shaq said, shaking his head slightly. "I don't. Explain it to me." The restaurant was silent now. Even the jazz in the background seemed muted. Hunter shifted, suddenly aware that the game he had started was no longer in his control. But Shaq wasn't done. "See, I've been to places like this my whole life," Shaq said, his voice calm but firm. "Played for teams owned by billionaires, sat at tables with presidents, built businesses, started charities, walked into rooms full of people just like you, thinking just like you. And you know what I learned?" Hunter didn't answer. Shaq leaned forward just slightly, not aggressive, not threatening, just present. "That I don't gotta prove nothing to anybody." A murmur swept through the guests. Not loud, but enough. A spark had been struck. Hunter's smirk faltered, just a little. He glanced at his phone again. His chat was shifting. The comments weren't laughing anymore. Damn, Shaq really called him out. Dude's making himself look stupid. Shaq's been rich longer than Hunter's been alive, El Mao. He swallowed, setting his phone down. His friends, usually so eager to hype him up, suddenly looked more interested in their drinks. The moment stretched. Shaq let it. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even offended. He had dealt with worse. But he had also learned, over years of experience, that sometimes the best way to fight ignorance wasn't with fists. It was with truth. Hunter shifted in his seat. "Man, relax. It was just a joke." Shaq nodded slowly. "Yeah, just a joke." But there was something about the way he said it. Something that made it clear that the only one laughing now was no one. The Golden Ivy had seen its fair share of high-profile guests, business tycoons, politicians, old money and new. But tonight, the energy was different. The restaurant, still bathed in warm golden light, felt colder, stiffer, as if the walls themselves were bracing for something. Hunter Graves leaned back in his chair, stretching out like he owned the place. His camera crew had repositioned slightly, making sure they were getting good angles, and his followers, his real audience, were eating up every second of it. He wasn't just dining at the Golden Ivy, he was performing, and right now, Shaq was his unwitting co-star. Hunter tapped a fork against his plate, his smirk widening. His voice carried just enough to make sure it reached every nearby table, the casual cruelty woven seamlessly into his words. "I swear, man, I thought this place had a dress code," he said, glancing at his crew. "Or like, a size limit." A few of his friends chuckled, but it wasn't the same easy laughter from before. There was hesitation now, a thin layer of doubt creeping into the cracks. A wealthy couple seated 2 tables away exchanged an uncomfortable look. The woman let out a quiet, forced chuckle, one of those nervous laughs people do when they aren't sure whether they should be laughing at all. The man beside her sipped his wine, eyes darting between Hunter and Shaq. Shaq heard every word, of course he did. But he didn't shift, didn't react. He simply continued cutting into his steak, his movements measured, his face unreadable. Hunter, emboldened by the lack of immediate pushback, leaned forward. "I mean, I get it," he said, his voice dripping with exaggerated sympathy. "You gotta eat to maintain that size, right? Gotta keep up the brand." His crew laughed louder this time, encouraged. Shaq set his fork down, slow and deliberate. He picked up his glass of water, took a sip, and placed it back down without a word. The silence stretched. Jamie, the young waiter who had fumbled the water earlier, stood near the bar, fists clenched at his sides. Beside him, Jordan, another waiter, tall, lanky, barely in his 20s, watched the scene with a growing sense of unease. Unlike Jamie, Jordan wasn't just frustrated. He was angry. He had grown up watching Shaq. Not just the basketball legend, but the man. The one who paid off struggling families' bills, who handed out shoes to kids who couldn't afford them, who showed up for people when no one else did. And now, this nobody, this arrogant influencer who only mattered because a screen told people he did, was trying to humiliate him. Jordan inhaled sharply and took a step forward, his jaw tight. "I wouldn't do that," came a voice beside him. Jordan turned to see Elliot, the maitre d', standing stiffly, his expression calm but warning. "Are you serious?" Jordan whispered, keeping his voice low. "You're just gonna let him—" "Not our place," Elliot murmured, cutting him off. "Not yet." Jordan's nostrils flared. He wanted to argue. He wanted to do something. But he knew Elliot was right. If he stepped in now, the situation could spiral. And Shaq, well, Shaq didn't need anyone fighting his battles for him. Back at the table, Hunter's grin widened. He was still waiting for a reaction. Still waiting for Shaq to break, to push back, to give him something that could be clipped, edited, uploaded, monetized. But Shaq just reached for his napkin, wiped his mouth, and let out a quiet chuckle. A real one, not nervous, not forced, just amused. Hunter blinked. "Something funny, big guy?" Shaq leaned back in his chair, his deep voice as calm as ever. "Nah, man, just thinking." "Thinking about what?" Shaq exhaled through his nose, the ghost of a smile still on his lips. "About how much effort you put into this." He gestured vaguely at the cameras, the crew, the carefully staged moment. All this work, all this noise. And for what? Hunter's smirk twitched, just slightly. For content, obviously. Shaq nodded, as if considering the answer. Then, with an almost lazy curiosity, he asked, "And how much do they pay you for that?" Hunter scoffed. "You wouldn't get it, old man. It's not about money, it's about reach, influence. My numbers are insane. Millions of people watch what I do." Shaq tilted his head, thoughtful. "Millions, huh?" "Yeah." Hunter crossed his arms, clearly pleased with himself. "I mean, you were big once. You know what it's like." Shaq chuckled again, shaking his head. "Nah, see, that's where you got it wrong. I didn't just get watched. I made an impact." Hunter's smirk slipped. "Just a little." Shaq gestured toward Jordan and Jamie, the young waiters standing by the bar, their faces tense. "See those boys over there? They know who I am, and it ain't 'cause I went viral. It's 'cause I showed up. When their kind of people needed help, I was there. Didn't need a camera crew to prove it." The restaurant was dead silent now. Hunter shifted in his chair. He was losing the room, and he knew it. He let out an exaggerated sigh. "Man, I don't get why people pretend to like guys like you." A murmur rippled through the guests. Shaq finally leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. For the first time, his presence wasn't just felt. It was heavy. "I don't need people to pretend," he said, his voice steady. "The respect I got, I earned it. And you're sitting here, running your mouth, thinking you're making me look bad. But let me ask you something." Hunter didn't respond. He couldn't. Shaq's voice dropped just slightly, not loud, but solid. "How come, in a room full of people, the only one who looks small is you?" The silence was suffocating now. Hunter's fingers twitched toward his phone, as if reaching for some invisible lifeline. He scanned the restaurant, expecting, hoping for some sign of agreement. Some smirk, some nod, some approval. But there was none. Even his own crew had gone still. The wealthy couple from before? Not laughing anymore. The woman was staring down at her plate. The man had shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. Jordan, from the bar, had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from grinning. Hunter's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. He still had his platform. He still had millions of followers. But here, in this moment, he had nothing. Shaq picked up his fork again, his posture relaxing. He had nothing left to prove. Hunter, desperate to regain control, scoffed loudly and grabbed his phone, glancing at his live stream chat. His confidence flickered for just a second, just long enough for him to see what people were saying. Damn, dude, you're getting cooked. Shaq just ended your whole career in one sentence. Not a good look, bro. Maybe just eat your food and go. His fingers curled around the phone, jaw tightening. This wasn't going how he planned. Not even close. He took a slow breath, forcing a smirk. Man, y'all are sensitive tonight, he muttered, shaking his head like none of this mattered. But it did. Everyone could see it. Shaq, unfazed, simply took another bite of his steak. And just like that, the power had shifted. Hunter Graves, self-proclaimed king of controversy, master of viral moments, influencer extraordinaire, had just been influenced. The tension inside the golden ivy was thick enough to taste. Conversations had dulled to whispers. Waitstaff moved cautiously between tables. And guests who had previously been focused on their meals now found themselves watching a scene unfold that no one had expected, but no one could look away from. Hunter Graves had made a career out of moments like this. Conflict was his currency, and he knew how to turn an awkward situation into viral gold. His phone sat propped up against a glass, streaming live to thousands of followers. The chat scrolled at a breakneck pace, flooding with messages, some amused, some supportive, but many not. Bro's about to get humbled in real time. Shaq's got more money than your whole bloodline. Why you coming at him like that? Looking real bitter, dude. Nah, but he's got a point. Celebs get too much credit. This is mad uncomfortable to watch. Hunter barely glanced at the comments. He had been in controversies before. Hell, he thrived in them. But this was different. The room was slipping away from him. His usual method, talk louder, talk faster, double down, wasn't working. Shaq wasn't giving him the reaction he wanted. The guests weren't backing him up. And worst of all, his audience wasn't unanimously on his side. Then, somewhere across the city, a single tweet changed everything. Claire Dorsey, a sharp, no-nonsense journalist with millions of followers and a reputation for cutting through internet noise, had been watching the live stream. And she didn't like what she saw. She typed out a quick tweet, fingers moving fast. Watching this influencer try to bait Shaquille O'Neal into an argument at the Golden Ivy is painful. Man thinks he's punching up when he's really just embarrassing himself. Stay classy, Shaq. She hit send. The tweet caught fire instantly. Within minutes, it was being retweeted, quote, tweeted, commented on. Other journalists chimed in. Public figures added their takes, and suddenly, what had been just another live stream became something bigger. At the Golden Ivy, the restaurant manager, Elliot, checked his phone and paled. His email was already flooding with alerts from PR teams, news sources, and industry insiders. This wasn't just a situation anymore. It was a crisis. His pulse quickened. The Golden Ivy was an establishment built on exclusivity and reputation. A viral scandal? A full-blown social media disaster? That was bad for business. He stole a glance at Shaq, who remained calm, and then at Hunter, whose smirk was starting to falter. Elliot needed to act. Fast. But before he could, Hunter saw an opening. A new wave of comments had started rolling in. People defending Shaq's intelligence, listing his achievements outside of basketball, the businesses he owned, the degrees he had earned, the millions he had quietly given to charity. And that made Hunter desperate. He let out a sharp, dismissive laugh, shaking his head. Man, y'all really act like this guy is a genius or something. A few murmurs rippled through the room, shifting from discomfort to outright disapproval. Hunter pressed on. I mean, come on, let's be real. The only reason people care about him is because he was good at throwing a ball into a hoop. He turned toward Shaq, his voice laced with mock sincerity. You got what? A degree someone else probably took tests for? Some fake business ventures your real financial team runs? Let's not pretend you got here on anything but dumb luck. The room froze. That was it. That was the line. Even Hunter's own crew exchanged wary glances. His friends, who had been chuckling along before, suddenly looked less sure of themselves. And yet, Shaq still didn't flinch. He exhaled, slow and steady, then finally, set his fork down and looked Hunter directly in the eyes. There was no anger in his expression, no frustration, just something far heavier, something that made even the air itself seem to shift. You ever hear about Luther Jackson? Shaq asked, his voice quiet, steady. Hunter blinked, caught off guard. Who? Shaq leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. Luther Jackson. Name ring a bell? Hunter scoffed. Nah, man. Who cares? Shaq nodded as if he expected that answer. Then he began. I was 10 years old, he said. Living in Newark, rough neighborhood, not a lot of opportunities. But there was this guy, Luther Jackson. He was 17, big dude. Not just in size, but in presence. Everyone knew him. He was one of those guys you looked up to because he made it out. Got a scholarship, full ride to play ball at a big college. People said he was going to go pro. Whole neighborhood was proud of him. The restaurant was silent now. Even the kitchen, which had been clattering with dishes and movement, had gone still. Shaq continued. But one summer, he came home for a few months before college started. One night we were all hanging out outside, just kids talking, playing ball in the street. And this guy, some businessman from the nicer part of town, rolls through in a shiny car. He was lost, looking for some event, asked for directions. Luther, being the guy he was, walked up to help. Told him how to get where he was going. Shaq's fingers tapped lightly against the table. Once. Twice. But the guy got nervous. Maybe it was 'cause Luther was big. Maybe it was 'cause he was black. Maybe it was just 'cause he was standing too close to that shiny car. But whatever it was, the guy didn't see Luther the way we did. Hunter shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Shaq's voice didn't change, didn't rise, didn't break. The guy drove off and called the cops, said someone was trying to rob him. Cops came flying in, found Luther, didn't ask questions, just assumed the worst. He got arrested right there in front of all of us. Lost his scholarship, lost everything. That one night, that one moment, took away everything he worked for. And it wasn't because he wasn't smart, wasn't because he wasn't talented, wasn't because he wasn't good enough. It was because some man with your kind of mindset didn't see him as anything more than a threat. The weight of the words settled over the restaurant like a storm rolling in. Shaq leaned back again, studying Hunter with an unreadable expression. Now me? I was lucky. I had people looking out for me. I made it. But you sit there, running your mouth, acting like I'm just some dumb jock who got lucky. He shook his head, his voice firm but calm. Son, you don't even know what it takes to survive in a world that sees you as nothing before you even get the chance to prove you're something. The restaurant was so silent that even the air itself seemed to be listening. Hunter, for the first time that night, looked unsure. His face was still twisted in arrogance, but his fingers twitched near his phone again, like he wanted to escape back into the safety of his online persona. Shaq let the moment stretch just long enough. Then he exhaled, picked up his fork again, and went back to his meal. And just like that, the tables had turned. Hunter, the master of controversy, the king of online debates, had just been served something no amount of social media clout could fix: reality. And the internet? The internet had seen it all. The restaurant had gone completely still. Even the jazz playing in the background seemed softer, as if the very air had decided to quiet itself in anticipation of what was coming next. Shaq took his time. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't performing. He simply let the moment breathe, allowed the weight of his words to settle over the room. His fingers tapped lightly on the edge of the table, his gaze steady on Hunter, who was shifting uncomfortably now, his once cocky posture slightly slouched. Shaq let out a slow exhale, as if remembering something far away. Then, in a voice calm but heavy with memory, He spoke. You know, I wasn't always this big. A few people let out quiet chuckles, unsure if it was meant to be a joke. But Shaq wasn't smiling. I was born in Newark. Back then, it wasn't the place you see on postcards. We lived in a small apartment. Me, my mom, my stepdad, my siblings. We didn't have much. But my mother, she made sure we had enough. She worked long shifts, sometimes 2 jobs, just to make sure we had food on the table. She was tough, but not because she wanted to be. She had to be. The room was listening now, not just with their ears, but with their attention. Even the waitstaff, who had been cautiously moving around tables, had slowed their steps. Shaq leaned forward slightly. I remember one night I was about 8, maybe 9. I was walking home from the park. I had this old basketball, wasn't even mine. I found it in a dumpster. I was dribbling it down the street when this car pulled up next to me. Windows down, 2 white guys in suits. One of them looked at me and said, "Hey boy, shouldn't you be out picking cotton?" A ripple of discomfort passed through the guests. Someone gasped quietly. Shaq's voice remained steady. Now at 8 years old, I didn't even fully understand what that meant. But I knew it wasn't good. I knew it was meant to make me feel small. And for a second, I did. I stood there, holding that busted-up basketball, watching them drive away, laughing. And I felt powerless. He let the word hang in the air for a moment. My mom found me sitting on the steps outside our apartment staring at that ball. She asked me what was wrong, and I told her. Told her exactly what they said. And you know what she did? Shaq's expression softened slightly, his voice dropping just a little. She sat down next to me, real quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Baby, the world is going to try to make you feel small every chance it gets. And if you let them, they win. But you don't let nobody take away your size. Not here." He tapped his chest lightly. "And not here." He tapped the side of his head. The room had gone from still to utterly motionless. Even the sound of glasses being set down had stopped. Hunter's smirk was gone now. His fingers twitched near his phone, but he wasn't checking his chat anymore. He was watching Shaq, maybe realizing for the first time that this wasn't a game. Shaq continued, his voice never wavering. "My mom didn't just teach me how to stand tall. She taught me how to be tall. She made me read books, study history, learn about the men and women who stood before me and refused to be broken. She told me, your strength ain't just in your muscles, baby. It's in how you carry yourself when people expect you to crumble." A quiet sniffle came from the direction of the kitchen. No one turned to look, but behind the pass, a black chef, who had been wiping down a counter, stopped mid-motion. His eyes were wet, his hands clenching the towel in his grip. Shaq exhaled. That night stuck with me. It stayed with me when I got on the court, when people told me I was too big, too slow, not smart enough. It stayed with me when I walked into meetings and saw the way some folks looked at me, like I was just another athlete who'd blow through his money and disappear. It stayed with me when I made my first $1,000,000, my first $10,000,000, my first 100. Because every single step of the way, there was someone like you, Hunter. Hunter stiffened. Someone who thought they could define me. Put me in a box. Reduce me to just a big guy who got lucky. The silence in the room was no longer just silence. It was electric. Hunter let out a dry, forced laugh. "Man, y'all are getting way too emotional over this. It's not that deep." Shaq's gaze didn't waver. "No, see, that's where you're wrong. It is that deep. It's always been that deep." Hunter scoffed, shaking his head. He glanced down at his phone, desperate for reassurance from his followers. But the chat had turned on him. "Shaq is dropping wisdom and you're sitting here looking dumb. Man, just log off. This ain't the move. Shaq has built hospitals. What have you built besides a career off negativity? This is embarrassing to watch." Hunter's face paled. This wasn't the reaction he had expected. The internet loved controversy. He had counted on that. But this was different. The restaurant guests had shifted too. Some nodded subtly, others sat with arms crossed, expressions unreadable. But there was one thing clear. Hunter had lost them. A couple at the far end of the room exchanged glances. The man, who had been watching silently, murmured, "He's done." His wife nodded. Even the restaurant staff had taken sides, their postures less neutral now. Elliot, the maitre d', had positioned himself near Shaq's table, as if quietly standing in solidarity. Hunter cleared his throat, desperate to regain control. "Look, I didn't mean—" Shaq held up a hand, stopping him. Then, he reached for his napkin, dabbed the corner of his mouth and said, "I think you did." The words landed heavier than anything else he had said. Hunter opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His face was burning now, his bravado crumbling under the weight of the moment. Shaq picked up his glass, took a sip of water, and leaned back in his seat, his point made. The room remained silent, processing everything that had just happened. And in that silence, the power had shifted completely. Shaq hadn't needed to raise his voice. He hadn't needed to get angry. He had simply spoken the truth. And for the first time in his life, Hunter Graves had no response. 6. The influencer's world crumbles. Hunter Graves had built his entire career on control, on knowing exactly how to stir a crowd, how to provoke just the right kind of outrage, how to keep himself trending. But for the first time, he felt that control slipping through his fingers like sand. His fingers twitched near his phone, his mind racing. He needed to flip this, shift the narrative. He'd done it before, turned backlash into engagement, hate into views. But something about this felt different. His eyes darted down to the chat. What had started as a mix of cheers and laughter from his followers had now soured into something else. "Dude, this is just sad now. Shaq is handling this like a king, and you're out here looking like a clown. Man, just log off before it gets worse." Hunter's stomach twisted. He glanced at his social media notifications. His numbers were dropping, fast. He clicked into his business email, his breath catching when he saw the flood of new messages. "Your sponsorship contract is under review due to recent controversies. Effective immediately, we are terminating our partnership. We do not condone the behavior displayed in your recent livestream." One after another. His sponsors, the ones who paid for his lifestyle, for the cars, the penthouses, the clout, were cutting ties. Not one or two, all of them. Hunter's throat went dry. The people who once profited off his arrogance now wanted nothing to do with him. But it didn't stop there. His phone vibrated violently as old clips resurfaced. Past jokes, past comments, all things he had brushed off as edgy humor. But in the current light, they didn't look like jokes anymore. They looked like patterns, screenshots of private messages, past live streams, tweets from years ago. People were digging, and they were finding everything. Hunter's breath came shorter. He looked up from his screen, suddenly aware of the room again. The restaurant wasn't his anymore. The energy, the attention, it had shifted entirely. And then Shaq spoke. "Hate doesn't make you powerful," he said, his voice steady. "It makes you small." Shaq let the words settle, watching Hunter with the same calm that had carried him through the entire night. "And right now," he added, his deep voice dropping just slightly, "you look about 2 inches tall." A low murmur rippled through the restaurant. Not laughter, not applause, just agreement. A knowing silence that hit harder than any insult ever could. Hunter's face burned. He had never felt this before. Not just embarrassment, but something worse, something deeper, irrelevance. He had come in thinking he could control the moment, that he could turn Shaq into his joke. But now he was the joke, and he needed to fix it. Fast. Hunter forced a chuckle, raising his hands in mock surrender. All right, I get it," he said, forcing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "People are getting way too sensitive these days. I mean, come on, it was just a joke, man. No hard feelings, right?" Shaq didn't respond. Hunter's grin twitched. The room was waiting, watching him, weighing him. So he went for the last trick he had left. "I mean, listen, if anyone was offended, I apologize," he said, leaning into the forced sincerity he had used so many times before. "I respect everyone, you know? No bad intentions, just a little fun. Maybe things got a little out of hand, but hey, that's just how it goes sometimes, right?" Silence. No one was buying it. Not the guests, not the restaurant staff, not even his own crew, who were avoiding eye contact, some subtly stepping back as if already distancing themselves from him. And then, from the far end of the restaurant, a chair scraped against the floor. Everyone turned. A man in his 60s, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, rose from his table. Silver-haired, with a face carved by time and wisdom, he adjusted the cuff of his sleeve before fixing his gaze on Hunter. Douglas Harrington, a regular at the Golden Ivy. Old money. The kind of man who owned things without having to tell people he did. When he spoke, his voice was calm, refined. But there was no mistaking the sharp edge beneath it. "You," Douglas said, gesturing vaguely at Hunter with his glass of scotch, "are an absolute disgrace." Hunter stiffened. "Whoa, man." "No." Douglas cut him off with a single word. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned his attention to Shaq. Mr. O'Neill Shaq inclined his head slightly. Douglas set his glass down with a quiet clink. "I want to personally apologize for having to witness that." He waved a dismissive hand toward Hunter, in a place of dignity. Hunter's face went red. "Man, why are you getting involved? You don't even know." Douglas turned back to him, raising a single brow. "I don't need to know you. I heard you." His lips curled slightly, as if the mere effort of acknowledging Hunter was distasteful. "And I don't believe this establishment has room for someone so cheap." Hunter's mouth opened, then closed. He looked around desperately for support, but there was none. The wealthy couple who had laughed earlier, staring at their plates now, pretending not to know him. His friends? Silent, shifting in their seats, clearly calculating how soon they could abandon ship. Even his own crew had stopped recording. Hunter's pulse pounded in his ears. The internet was turning on him. The real world was turning on him. And for the first time in his life, he realized he had no one. The maitre d', Elliot, straightened his jacket and stepped forward. "Mr. Graves," he said, his voice as polite as it was firm, "I think it's best you leave." Hunter's stomach dropped. "Are you kidding me?" Elliot didn't blink. "I assure you, sir, I am not." Hunter turned to his crew, but they were already packing up. He turned to the guests, but they were done with him. And then finally, he turned back to Shaq. His last shot, his last attempt at salvaging something. Shaq met his eyes, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like Hunter wanted to say something, maybe to beg, maybe to fight, maybe to lash out. But he saw something in Shaq's face. Not pity, not anger, just finality. And Hunter knew. It was over. His fists clenched at his sides, but he said nothing. He turned sharply, his chair scraping loudly against the floor as he stormed toward the exit. No one stopped him. No one cared. As the doors swung shut behind him, a strange calm settled over the restaurant. The tension, the weight of the moment, it all seemed to dissolve, leaving only quiet relief in its place. Shaq exhaled, shaking his head slightly before turning back to his meal. He picked up his fork and knife, as if nothing had ever happened. And then slowly, a single sound broke the silence, a quiet clink of a glass being raised. Douglas Harrington lifted his scotch toward Shaq, in silent respect. One by one, the guests followed. A quiet, wordless acknowledgement. A gesture of something deeper than mere applause. Shaq, ever humble, simply nodded. Then, as if the night had never been interrupted, he took another bite of his steak. The lesson had been learned. And Hunter Graves? He was already forgotten. The air inside the Golden Ivy had changed. The tension that had hung thick like humidity had lifted, but something new had settled in its place. A quiet, satisfied energy, one that filled the spaces where Hunter Graves's arrogance had once been. At the center of it all, Shaq remained composed. His presence, as steady as ever, was a stark contrast to the man across from him. Hunter, however, was unraveling. His mind raced, desperately searching for a way to regain control. He glanced at his phone, praying for reassurance, for his followers to back him up, for someone to throw him a lifeline. But the notifications weren't what he had hoped for. The backlash had begun. "Man, this ain't it." You just embarrassed yourself. Shaq handled that like a boss. You, on the other hand. Dude, you're done. You just don't know it yet. LMAO at you getting humbled in real time. The messages scrolled faster than he could read them. And then, the worst notification of all, an email from one of his biggest sponsors. Your partnership with us has been terminated, effective immediately. Hunter's stomach clenched. He swiped frantically, but it was everywhere. More emails, more brands pulling out, more people exposing his past, his patterns, his entire brand for what it truly was. A sinking feeling took hold. This wasn't just a bad night. This was the end. And then, a voice cut through his spiral. Calm, controlled, absolute. Mr. Graves, Elliot, the restaurant manager said, stepping forward. His posture was crisp, professional, but the edge in his tone left no room for negotiation. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Hunter's head snapped up. What? Elliot adjusted his cuffs, unmoved by Hunter's incredulous tone. We don't serve people like you here. The words landed like a hammer. Hunter's eyes darted around, searching for someone, anyone, to back him up. His crew, still silent. The wealthy guests who had once laughed at his jokes? Looking away, suddenly very interested in their plates. He let out a forced, incredulous laugh. You're kicking me out? For what? For talking? For making a joke? Elliot didn't blink. For making it very clear that you don't belong here. Hunter's nostrils flared. His carefully crafted persona, the confidence, the smirk, the control, was slipping fast. This is a joke. This whole place is a joke. Elliot didn't argue. He simply stepped aside and gestured toward the door. And then, the final humiliation. A security guard who had remained unnoticed near the entrance moved forward. Not aggressive, not forceful, but deliberate. A clear message. Hunter's mouth opened, then closed. He had two choices, make an even bigger fool of himself or walk out on his own. He chose the latter. As he turned toward the exit, chin raised in forced defiance, he caught one last glimpse of Shaq, still seated, still calm, still untouched by all of it. That was what stung the most. Shaq had never needed to raise his voice, never needed to stoop to Hunter's level. He had let the truth do all the work. Hunter clenched his fists, forcing himself to keep walking. But just as he reached the doors, it happened. A slow, deliberate clap. One pair of hands, then another, and another. And then, suddenly, the entire restaurant. The applause wasn't booming. It wasn't theatrical. But it was certain. And it was all for Shaq. Hunter froze. For a fleeting second, he wanted to turn back, to yell, to fight for some kind of dignity. But there was none left to fight for. His hands balled into fists as he pushed through the doors. Outside, the cold night air hit him like a slap. But the worst part? His phone was still buzzing. Not with support, with consequences. While Hunter sat alone in his car, staring blankly at his screen, the rest of the world was watching. The clip had gone viral. Shaq wisdom was trending worldwide. People weren't just sharing the footage of the confrontation. They were breaking it down, analyzing every second, every moment, every shift in power. Then came the tweet that sealed it. Claire Dorsey, the journalist who had been watching live, dropped a single razor-sharp line. Some people talk big. Some people are big. Tonight, we saw the difference. The tweet caught fire instantly. Actors, athletes, business moguls. Everyone was retweeting, adding their own takes. Memes flooded in, screenshots of Hunter's face as he realized he had lost. GIFs of Shaq leaning back, cool and composed. Side-by-side comparisons of Shaq's real-life achievements versus Hunter's online nonsense. Hunter's entire brand, built on provocation, on mocking others, on stirring controversy, had turned against him. Not because he had picked a fight, but because he had lost it, and the whole world had seen. The applause had faded, but the shift in energy remained. Shaq, ever the same, simply nodded to those who had shown support, offering a small, appreciative smile before returning to his meal. Jordan, The young waiter, who had idolized Shaq since childhood, took a hesitant step forward. "Sir," he said, voice careful. That was incredible." Shaq looked up, his eyes kind but knowing. "What's your name, young man?" "Jordan, sir." Shaq nodded. "Jordan, let me tell you something." Jordan straightened, hanging on every word. Shaq's tone was gentle but firm. "You ever find yourself in a situation where somebody's trying to tear you down, trying to make you feel small?" Jordan nodded. Shaq pointed toward the door. "Remember this moment. Remember what just happened. 'Cause real strength, it don't come from yelling, or fighting, or proving a point to people who don't want to listen." Jordan swallowed. "Where does it come from?" Shaq smiled slightly. "It comes from knowing who you are, and never letting anybody take that away from you." Jordan's chest swelled with pride. He nodded, committing every word to memory. And with that, Shaq picked up his fork and took another bite of his meal, completely unbothered. Because the truth had already done its job. And Hunter Graves? Hunter was done. The golden ivy slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Conversations picked up again, but they were different now, quieter, more reflective. The clinking of glasses and silverware resumed, yet there was an undercurrent of something deeper in the air. The tension that had once coiled through the restaurant had unraveled, but in its place was something heavier: awareness. At the center of it all, Shaq sat in silence. Not because he was upset, not because he was angry, but because moments like these always left him thinking. He had seen this kind of thing play out before, different faces, different words, but the same old story. He had learned long ago that winning wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about making them see the truth for themselves. And tonight, the truth had spoken loud and clear. Yet, even in victory, Shaq wasn't celebrating. Because deep down, he knew that for every Hunter Graves who got humbled, there were 100 more waiting in the wings. And that was the part that never sat easy. He exhaled slowly, setting his napkin on the table. As much as the world changed, some battles never really ended. Jordan, the young waiter, approached cautiously, his hands clenched into nervous fists. The energy he carried now was different from earlier in the night. No longer tension, but gratitude. Shaq noticed him immediately. "What's up, young blood?" Jordan hesitated, then exhaled sharply, as if trying to contain the emotions that had been bubbling inside him. I wanted to say thank you," Jordan said finally, "for handling that the way you did." Shaq raised a brow. "Oh yeah? What way was that?" Jordan shifted on his feet, choosing his words carefully. "You could have, gone off on him. Humiliated him right back, but you didn't, and somehow that made it hit harder." Shaq studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That's because anger's easy, man. Hate, that's easy too. But control, that's what really takes strength." Jordan swallowed, absorbing every word. "I ain't gonna lie," Shaq continued, his voice steady. "I used to think strength was about size, about how hard you could hit back. But my mom, she taught me different. Told me real power ain't about fighting. It's about knowing when you don't have to." Jordan exhaled, his shoulders relaxing. That's what I want to be like." Shaq smiled. "Then you already halfway there, kid." Before Jordan could say anything else, the kitchen doors swung open, and the chef from earlier stepped out. The same chef who had paused mid-motion behind the pass, the one who had silently wiped away a tear when Shaq told his story. He was a large man, built from years of carrying heavy pots and working over open flames. His apron was stained from the night's labor, but he didn't seem to notice. Instead, he walked toward Shaq, stopping a few feet from the table, his hands clenching at his sides. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally, he spoke. "I just wanted to say, that meant something." His voice was deep, but there was an unmistakable emotion beneath it. "What you said, what you didn't say, all of it." Shaq nodded, his expression softening. "I appreciate that, brother." The chef exhaled, as if shaking off the weight of something unspoken. Then, clearing his throat, he shifted back into a more comfortable stance. "Steak was good?" Shaq grinned. Man, I ain't never had a bad meal from this place. The chef chuckled, but there was still a hint of something else in his expression. Something that said thank you, even if he didn't say it out loud. And then, with a small nod, he turned and walked back into the kitchen. Not long after, Elliot, the restaurant manager, approached Shaq's table. His usual professionalism was still intact, but there was something different in his demeanor now. Something genuine. He placed the billfold on the table, but when Shaq reached for it, Elliot stopped him with a firm shake of his head. "This one's on us." Mr. O'Neill. Shaq frowned slightly. "Man, I don't need—" "I know," Elliot interrupted gently. "But this isn't about that." He took a step back, standing tall. "This is about respect." Shaq studied him for a moment before nodding. He understood what Elliot was really saying. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about charity. It was a statement, a way for the Golden Ivy to show where they stood. And that meant more than any price on a receipt. Shaq leaned back in his chair and let out a small chuckle. "Well, hell, can't argue with that." Elliot smiled. "No, sir, you can't." As Shaq sat there finishing his meal in peace, the world outside the Golden Ivy was on fire. The internet had taken over. The clip of Shaq's speech was everywhere. People weren't just talking about it, they were dissecting it, analyzing every word, every reaction. Celebrities retweeted it. Business leaders weighed in. Civil rights activists called it a masterclass in handling ignorance with dignity. And then, there was the tweet that sealed the night. Claire Dorsey, the journalist who had been watching live, posted a single devastating line. "Some people talk big. Some people are big. Tonight, we saw the difference." Shaq wisdom. Within minutes, the tweet had millions of likes and shares. Shaq wisdom wasn't just trending. It was dominating. Memes flooded in. Screenshots of Shaq leaning back, Hunter's face crumbling, side-by-side images of real power versus performative arrogance. Someone posted a timeline of Shaq's achievements, his businesses, his philanthropy, the hospitals he had funded, the schools he had built. Another post highlighted Hunter's career and how it had been built on tearing people down. The contrast was brutal. Hunter Graves's social media numbers were plummeting by the second. Sponsors were distancing themselves in real time. His apology video, rushed, desperate, completely insincere, was being ripped apart in the comments. And in the middle of it all, Shaq was exactly the same. Unbothered, unmoved. Because while the internet was just catching up, he had already won long before the cameras even started rolling. As the night wound down, Shaq finally rose from his seat. The staff watched him go, some nodding respectfully, others simply grateful that they had witnessed something they wouldn't forget. Jordan stood near the entrance, still reeling from the night's events. Before leaving, Shaq patted him on the shoulder. "Keep your head up, kid. The world's always gonna have hunters. Just make sure you ain't one of them." Jordan smiled. "Yes, sir." And with that, Shaq stepped out into the cool night air. No cameras, no spotlight. Just a man walking away from a moment that had never really been about him, but about something much bigger. Behind him, inside, the Golden Ivy, people still whispered about what had happened. And outside, the world was still watching. The sun had barely risen when Hunter Graves did the one thing he swore he'd never do: apologize. His career was spiraling. Overnight, his sponsors had pulled out, his social media following had nosedived, and his name had become synonymous with public disgrace. Hunter had spent the entire night refreshing his phone, watching the backlash unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Every time he thought it had peaked, it got worse. Headlines, think pieces, reaction videos dissecting his every word. And the memes. God, the memes. Someone had edited a video where Shaq literally dunked on him, superimposing a basketball over the conversation, making it look like Hunter had been posterized in front of millions. Others were less creative, more direct. The fastest fall from grace ever caught on camera. From influencer to irrelevance in under 24 hours. The internet is undefeated. R.I.P. Hunter's career. Hunter had built his entire brand on controversy. But now, he was the controversy. And no one was on his side. So he did the only thing he thought could save him. He turned on the camera. Sitting in his dimly lit apartment, his usual energy replaced by forced humility, he sighed deeply, rubbing his hands together as if struggling to find the right words. "Hey guys," he began, his voice carrying the artificial sincerity of a man who cared more about damage control than actual regret. "I just want to take a moment to address what happened last night. I realize that some of the things I said were taken the wrong way. Mistake number 1. The chat flooded instantly. "Taken the wrong way? Dude, we saw what you did. That's not an apology, that's gaslighting. Bro, just log off." Hunter pushed forward, oblivious to how badly this was going. "I never meant to offend anyone," he continued, forcing a sigh. "I've always prided myself on pushing boundaries, on creating content that sparks conversations. But I see now that maybe I took things too far. Mistake number 2. Maybe? LMAO. Man, you got humbled and still don't get it. You're not sorry. You're sorry you lost everything. Shaq wasn't even trying and he still ended you." Hunter swallowed hard. His last play, the one he hoped would at least stop the bleeding. "And to Shaq," he said, forcing his voice into something resembling sincerity, "I want to say, I respect you. You're a legend. And I hope one day we can put this behind us. Mistake number 3. Oh nah, you don't get to act like you respect him now. Shaq don't care about you, bro. Move on. Ain't no put this behind us. You got yourself here." Hunter closed his eyes for a second. He had hoped this would turn things around, or at least stop the freefall, but it didn't. It only made it worse. Because the world could smell fake from a mile away. While Hunter was drowning in self-inflicted humiliation, Shaq was already on to more important things. By mid-morning, he had left the noise of the internet behind. The headlines, the viral clips, the social media chaos. It wasn't his concern. He had real work to do. At the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation, the phones were ringing off the hook. Donations were pouring in. People who had seen his grace under fire wanted to support the things he actually cared about. Education, healthcare, helping struggling families. Shaq didn't ask for it, but that's what real influence looked like. By noon, he was in the heart of the city, where it really mattered. A children's hospital. No cameras. No PR team. Just him. He walked through the halls, towering over nurses and doctors, yet somehow making himself feel small in the best way. Kneeling down to talk to the kids, listening, laughing, making them feel seen. A little boy, no older than 8, beamed up at him from a hospital bed. "Big Shaq," he said, grinning wide. "You're huge." Shaq let out a deep chuckle. "You think I'm big? Man, you got a whole army of people in here making sure you get better. That's big." The boy giggled. "You ever play Mario Kart?" Shaq smirked. "Man, do I ever. You trying to catch this loss?" The boy's eyes widened with excitement as Shaq grabbed a controller from the nurse's station. And just like that, this was what mattered. Not clout, not internet drama. Real moments, real people, real impact. Back in the world of TV interviews and viral moments, networks were scrambling to get Shaq's reaction to the Hunter Graves fiasco. Producers from morning shows, sports networks, even mainstream news channels flooded his team with requests for an exclusive sit-down. Shaq turned them all down. Except one. A casual interview for a sports podcast. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just a conversation. The host, a young journalist named Devin Rowe, kept it simple. "Shaq, the whole world saw what happened at the Golden Ivy last night. You could have embarrassed that guy 100 different ways, but you didn't. Why?" Shaq leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and let out a slow breath. "'Cause I ain't gotta," he said. Devin nodded, waiting. Shaq scratched his beard, thinking for a second before continuing. "Some people gotta learn the hard way," he said finally. "But I hope he truly learns." Devin studied him. "Do you think he will?" Shaq chuckled, shaking his head. "That ain't up to me." And that was all he had to say about it. As the world kept spinning, as the internet moved on to its next trending moment, Shaq walked through the halls of the children's hospital, his presence larger than life, but his heart somehow even bigger. A nurse stepped beside him, smiling. You know you don't have to do this. You could just send a check like everyone else. Shaq looked at her, then at the kids, who were still buzzing from his visit. What's the point of having it, he said simply, if you don't use it for something that matters? She nodded, understanding. The final shot? Shaq. Walking down the hospital hallway, surrounded by kids, their laughter echoing behind him. Not in front of a camera, not in a viral clip, but in the only place that ever really counted, where his true greatness had nothing to do with his wealth, and everything to do with his heart. Some people talk big, some people are big. This wasn't just about a restaurant, a viral moment, or even Shaq. It was about character, respect, and knowing when to stand tall without saying a word. The world is full of noise, but real power? It's in action, in integrity, in lifting others instead of tearing them down. So, ask yourself, when the moment comes, will you be the one chasing attention, or the one who doesn't need it?